The battle for the spirit of the Democratic Party between the left and centrist liberals has been a continued and long-fought battle over the last decade. While the left tends to lean into populist rhetoric, the centrist liberal puts on a smiling technocratic face. About 5 years ago, one of the most notorious technocratic liberals out there put out a book with a baffling, but to be completely honest, charmingly odd title, 1 Billion Americans. I always knew that I would have to torture myself at some point and read it for the show. It wasn't as torturous an experience as I thought it would be, but that's because it's not really just a centrist liberal vision about fertility and the birth rate. It's about a lot more, with some good ideas, some genuinely insane ideas, and a whole lot left up to the imagination. My name is June Sternbach.
My name is Josh Borman.
This is Ill-Conceived, a podcast about natalism.
Well, June, I've got some really awful news, and I'm sad to be the bearer of this news.
Oh my God! It's yeah, you're starting off the show very sad and somber. I'm not looking forward to this one.
Yeah, after 46 seasons, MTV has canceled Ridiculousness, starring Rob Dyrdek.
No, wait, that's been like a big pillar of my identity.
It's the only thing that's on MTV anymore. I don't know how they're gonna do it.
No, they're collapsing. I mean, this is the biggest recession indicator yet. I mean,
Absolutely.
If they lose Ridiculousness after 40 seasons, like what do we have left?
It's the old saying, right? As goes Rob Dyrdek, so goes the nation. And here we are again. Apparently, they wanted... he could have made, this is according to USA Today, more than $45 million a year if the show had been renewed. They were already paying him $32 million at least. But his production company is going bankrupt. I think outside of Ridiculousness, he doesn't have anything. I feel kind of bad for him.
My God. Poor, bad day in America.
It is a bad day in America. And I feel like what we need to do is bring back the America that we loved. And what better way to do that than by accelerating population growth, right?
Yeah, oh my God. Yeah, I mean, that's what we're talking about today. With 1 billion Americans. Holy shit. Have you ever considered that we could have 1 billion Americans?
I mean, that's a lot of Americans.
That's a lot of people.
I never... I don't dare to dream that big. Let's put it that way. I have a limited imagination.
It's quite ambitious, and I think we do have to get to the world famous mailbag. But I think we're gonna just see how in the sky Matt Yglesias' book actually is very soon.
I'm excited.
Yeah,
I read it. I've got a lot of thoughts. I know you do too.
I feel like the last 2 days we've just been texting each other everything we've been wanting to say about this book, and I'm really excited. I'm very excited.
But yes, before we get there, obviously the world famous mailbag, we got to do it, and this is probably also a good time to note now that I think of it, that if you haven't been able to get enough of the world famous mailbag, I've got great news for you. We have started a Patreon. It is patreon.com/illconceived. Now, don't worry, this isn't going to affect anything to do with the main show. We're still going to be doing weekly episodes. The format's going to remain exactly the same. The world famous mailbag will remain the world famous segment on the main show.
It has to.
However, it has to. But here's the thing. We have been getting so much mail that we want to be able to respond to even more of it, because a lot of the stuff that people are sending us is really interesting and worth talking about. And also, usually when we do episodes, we also get feedback being like, hey, have you thought about this piece or this thing? And to give us the opportunity to address that stuff and also help pay for my health insurance, which is going to be very expensive next year, we are starting, like I said, a Patreon. Our first episode is already out at patreon.com/illconceived. And we answered some mail about Elon Musk. And that's how we're going to kind of keep doing it, is talking about not the most recent week's episode, but the week before, so that people still have enough time to get all their emails in and we have enough time to read everything.
So the next episode on the Patreon, as of recording right now, will be about NatalCon, all of the emails about NatalCon.
And we have already gotten a few, which is cool. So that'll probably be going out on Monday, or maybe Tuesday. I'm not really sure what the schedule will be for the mailbag yet. It's either going to be Monday or Tuesday.
Definitely before Wednesday, though.
Yes. Whereas, of course, these episodes will continue to come out on Friday or Saturday every once in a while if, we have to record a little later in the week and the episode takes long. But we are targeting roughly Monday and Friday, so you can begin and end your week with Ill-Conceived.
And again, just to reiterate, it's not a necessity to continue listening to the main show that you've already been listening to. It's just a little bonus, a little bit extra if you can't get enough of us talking about having sex and having children.
That's
which
right.
Everyone loves.
And it is $5 a month, or if you are incredibly wealthy and want to give us $999 a month, there is one and only one patron who will be designated the exclusive chonky baby.
If you've ever wanted to be the chonkiest baby, now is your chance.
That's right. But yeah, I'm actually very excited just because already it seems like we're able to find some fun stuff on those bonus episodes that we aren't really able to do on the main show, where we kind of have to be a bit more structured and orderly. These bonus mailbag apps, they're just more of a hang sesh. If you want to extend your parasocial relationship with us, we'd be happy to have you.
And if you want to hear all the times I'm like, Josh, edit this, and where he doesn't save me because he's not editing them.
And I say, no.
Yeah. So if you also want that, that's where you can find that.
But for the main episode, which is the one that we're doing right now, as I've said, we of course are going to continue to do our world famous mailbag. We've got 2 letters today that we're going to read. So our first email here is from Emma, who says, "Hey, June and Josh. Once again, defeated in the marketplace of ideas." Emma here. I was listening to one of the episodes from last month where there was a specific mention of flat Earth and rejections of reality. This came up with people mentioning leaving extreme religious sects. This was a kill shot direct to my soul, as that argument is not just one laundered by Christian nationalist freaks. I have heard verbatim these same arguments from transphobic parents who directly compared my questioning of gender to suggesting the earth is flat. Not sure if it's natalism per se, but it sure as fuck is based on the same fear of impurity and birth circumstances equating to how you are. There's a degree of infantilization also demonstrated in the weird paternalistic repression, an implicit denial of autonomy. My premature birth was brought up when I mentioned wanting to transition.
I cannot believe that.
That's
just like mean. That's just straight up like that. Like they have like I'm assuming the parents brought that up. They were like holding that back. They were waiting to drop that.
And then I'm seeing the follow-up sentence here. This rightly elicited a what the fuck response from my partner.
Yeah.
And also I'm disabled, so all that kind of shit is also rooted in ableism. An unthinking, oh, I doubt my child is able to do that or make that choice. And thankfully I'm all right despite all that. I've chosen the route of calling this shit weird, which has had some success. I'm early 20s and have thankfully lived away from college for a few years. To end on a lighter note, I have joined local trans groups in my city and got all the resources I can and cute clothes from a swap. Cannot recommend enough. Go join groups and servers, etc. It truly is a massive help to keep sane. Also, Josh, Lions suck. Go Pack, go. Come on.
Wisconsinite.
Unbelievable. Well, this was really one that's leaning heavily into June's corner, and which I will countenance, but I'm not happy about it.
Look, I always win. What can I say? But no, this is like unreal though. Like I think it is a really good point that it's like a lot of people fail to like operate within reality, right? A lot of the way that transphobes operate is they're like, oh, you'll never be a real woman. And it's like, okay, but that's not really contending with like the state of transitioning and like estrogen being in my body right now. They're not really operating within like the actual material world. They're operating on like some crazy like structured hypotheticals and like they're not actually moving into a real world. It's a very odd end of the same coin, you know?
Well, I think it comes down to something that we've talked about a bit now, which is this idea that it is a subversion, that being trans, being gender nonconforming, whatever, is a subversion or denial of like honest to goodness, hard scientific facts and principles. Mm-hmm. Whereas the reality of it is that it's a combination of chemistry and social construct.
As we have mentioned before, it really, if you can break down gender in that simple of a way, because let's be honest, like it's not that hard. Being like transitioning is not a hard process, like on the base level. It's not a physically hard or demanding thing. It's just something you can do. So if it's that easy to break down gender barriers and gender roles, that's what's terrifying to a lot of people.
And also, I'll just say, yeah, like the everybody, this is our position on this show. I think it's safe to say bodily autonomy is fucking great. It is great to be able to do what it is that you feel that you need to do with your body, as long as it's something that is helping you live a better and more fulfilled life.
Absolutely, 100%. We're a pro-choice podcast, as
That's
we
right.
always love to say. Cool. And then I think from there, we'll do this other mailbag here from Jacob. Dear NatalCon 2026 keynote speakers. That is,
yes.
I mean, I feel like this is an invitation right now.
That's
we're
right.
already
That's right.
in. We're in.
Kevin,
This is someone
Kevin
on the
might not
board.
have invited us, but somebody else did. So we're going to be like, hey, man, we got an invitation.
Oh, yeah, we were invited already. And he continues, in your most recent episode, you mentioned how natalists tend to fall into the trap of assuming current trends will continue forever, which seems to be the ultimate fallacy in their ideology. This parallels similar apocalyptic fears from decades ago about overpopulation. I'm curious to hear your thoughts on how the overpopulation movement compares with natalism. While they seem like opposites, many of the concerns about the relative birth rates of white and non-white people remain the same. Additionally, in several episodes, you've mentioned offhand that you believe declining birth rates are a real problem. Given that global overpopulation didn't happen, what makes you believe that the current declining birth rates are a legitimate concern? So there's two parts to this. I think with overpopulation, I do want to dive into that topic on a later episode, because I think the topic of overpopulation does deserve a full episode. Because
Definitely.
like when I was younger, overpopulation was like, to me, that seemed like one of the biggest concerns. And as I got older, I started to realize that it wasn't really happening in any way. Birth rates have continued to decline. Global populations are still increasing, but it's not like we're not hitting a point where it's like it's dangerously overpopulated. I don't think that'll ever really happen. I don't think that's a thing. And overpopulation, like the fear of that, also does kind of come from like a conservative reactionary angle, because then if you start saying things are overpopulated, what populations should you start cutting back on? And that's like that fear that I have with overpopulation, because it is sort of reactionary on its like if you dig a little deeper.
And what's also interesting is that classic texts about overpopulation, stuff like the population bomb, for instance, which I think is probably one of the texts that we'll use when we do that episode.
100%, yeah.
The sort of most common critics of that actually tend to be natalists, and specifically Christian natalists. I think we talked a little bit maybe about how like Focus on the Family, James Dobson, one of the big texts that he railed against in the early days of Focus on the Family was that book. So it's one of those weird things where like there has been an ideological shift where those critiques that previously existed were critiquing an ideology or an idea that was also based, I think, in an inaccurate or incomplete understanding of extrapolation and trajectories and stuff like that. And so it's definitely something that I think is a much bigger topic than we can just address in one question. But also to go on to the second question, why are declining birth rates a legitimate concern? I think that the question is less to do with declining birth rates per se, in the same way that like growing births per se is not necessarily a problem. The question is, how does that change the way that our country and our world works, particularly in the face of climate change, right? Like, what do migration patterns mean? How do we maybe need to restructure our cities? Things like that. Those are the bigger questions. And so the issue is less to do with fewer people being born and more to do with the services and other things that will by necessity need to be cut, particularly in less populated areas.
I think the best way to illustrate I think what we both believe here on this issue is looking at like school funding. Like if less children or adults are going to college or schools in general, some schools will eventually close because they don't get the amount of students they need to keep it running. They don't get the taxes in that locality they need to continue running the schools. So there's not necessarily like a problem, but there will be like shifts in cities and like decreased public goods because of that. I think there's ways, of course, to like compensate for that, but I think it's less. Yeah, no, I think you nailed it, Josh. It's less that it's like a real problem. I'm not like losing sleep over like a slightly falling population in the future. But I just think it's like an important thing to consider as we go forward, because I don't think that trend is going to reverse anytime soon. And I think it's sort of just important to think about how infrastructure will be affected, how public transit in bigger cities will be affected. It's just something I think that is maybe just more interesting to think about and important to think about more than a real problem.
I mean, particularly in a country that is as geographically large and disparate as the United States. Because like even Canada, which is obviously a bigger country, a much bigger country geographically than the United States.
Yeah.
The vast majority of the population lives, you know, just in a few concentrated areas. And pretty much the entire northern half of the country, with the exception of a few settlements, is unpopulated.
Yeah.
That's not how it is in the U.S.
And of course, there are things like we can increase taxes to maybe compensate for some of these things, which I think should be done. But as of right now, that's not really happening, sadly, as much as I really want that too. I think the ideal situation, because like the problem as illustrated by sort of the overpopulation thing too, isn't that there's too many people. It's that like consumption is really high. Like Americans overconsume on every level. And I think there is like an argument for like, it's okay. It should be okay to like be able to maintain the same population size, but also like consume less and have like less of a carbon footprint, because that's really what the concern with overpopulation, I think on a base level is like how it can drive climate change, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Particularly as countries continue to industrialize and sort of demand a American style standard of living, right? So it's both within the United States and North America more broadly, right? Because in the West, Canada and the US are number one and number two, respectively, in terms of carbon emissions per capita. And so that would certainly not be sustainable, especially if the population continues to grow. And that's, I guess, a preview of coming attractions for the book we're about to talk about.
Absolutely.
But yeah, there's bigger questions here regarding how do you make sure that any growth, whether you're talking about population growth, economic growth, or anything, can happen in a way that is sustainable? Because that's the operative question right now.
And I think this sort of, especially as we start to go into this book, I think it's like a little important that we do talk a little bit more about our views on natalism and maybe like just the birth rate generally. I mean, we've kind of hit most of these points, but like, I think the overall point isn't that we're like concerned about the birth rate. I think, through this show, we're just sort of, I think, curious and interested in documenting the way that the right in particular, but I think just like everyone at this point sort of talks about the birth rate and like what that means for the world we live in. But like, at least for my end, I don't think there's like any inherent morality on increasing or decreasing populations. Josh, I think you said this a couple of weeks ago to me, but like I think like I'm a centrist natalist, I suppose. That it's just like, it's fine. It's like having kids is a thing you do. Personally, I like being alive myself. I don't know if I want kids, but it's like being alive and having kids is like a neutral thing. It's like a thing you can do.
I would say that my views on the subject overall, I'm still developing them, because it's something that I've always been following, particularly because reproductive health is a policy thing that I have been following for a very, very long time. I think it's one of the most important pieces of policy, period, which is why I get so very, very angry when, centrist Dems are like, well, abortion is an issue that alienates people. It's like, shut up, you're a moron. But what I would say is, I also don't really see a moral valence one way or the other unless it's being done forcibly, right? It's a problem if you are conducting a genocide. And it's also a problem if you're doing the fucking Lebensborn thing and you are rounding up your best Aryan women and forcing them to have a bunch of babies, right?
Or alternatively, taking away reproductive freedom,
exactly,
like how Roe v. Wade was done away with, and it's harder to get an abortion. That's like a bad thing. Taking away bodily autonomy is bad.
Exactly, and the rolling back of abortion rights is ultimately a piece of the natalist project. They want to do this so that people will have more babies.
Yeah. And I think that's like the thing is, I think, Josh, you and I both came into the show not really knowing a lot about this topic at all, but we pretty quickly realized that it's sort of like this birth rate natalist project on the right, but just like generally sort of has a through line to a lot more topics than at least I initially realized. Like it's sort of way broader of a subject than I ever anticipated it being.
Yeah, it has remarkable centrality within the project overall. It's surprising how many things that seem to not make sense at first, particularly as regards like the conservative project. It's these things where it's like, well, why would they want that? And then you think, oh, it's because they want to have more white Christian babies.
Yes.
All of a sudden, it makes a lot more sense.
Yeah. So I think ultimately it's just like an interesting and really salient framework to like analyze politics in, which I find a lot of pleasure in personally. I really like analyzing politics and thinking about it. It's sadly, I wish it wasn't, but it's sadly one of my hobbies is just thinking about politics. So I think we're both cursed with that reality.
Well, you know who else likes thinking a lot about politics?
Our subject of the day, Matt
Yglesias.
I have been wanting to read this book for the show for like a while now. And I was like really scared to, because I'm like, I don't want to read his writing. I don't like reading his tweets. I don't want to read a whole 200-page book of his thoughts. That sounds horrible.
Getting through 260 characters of his shit is a trial enough.
It is.
You're telling me I have to read 280 pages?
God, just horrible. But something I think I quickly learned is that, like, at least with this book, I haven't read a lot of his like other writing, but in this book in particular, it's not like the most offensive stuff. His tweets are frankly like the worst of his shit. That's where he like just says his like most insane takes. There's still some insane stuff in here. But I guess for the people who don't know, who is Matt Yglesias? I think, like, to someone like me, he's been like a foundational person online for a while now, because he's sort of always had like, you know, the centrist technocratic take on like everything. He is like the perfect technocratic liberal. The way he looks at the world is basically just like take morality out of the equation. He thinks that if you can just convince people of the best argument, you'll win every political debate there is. Like if you can just convince people of the right things, you'll win, which I don't necessarily agree with.
I don't agree with it at all.
I mean, not at all.
I think there was a point in time where I was so fucking debate brained that I was like, well, why don't you understand my logic? Why am I not making myself clear? You just have to understand that at the end of the day, it's not about who has the best argument. And also a lot of his arguments are really bad. So there's that too.
There is. Yeah, no, but it's more, I think these days, I'm personally more sort of in the idea that it's all about, maybe not all about, but it's a lot about rhetoric. Rhetoric is very important. But Matt Yglesias himself, he used to write for Slate. He co-founded Vox before eventually leaving to start his Substack, where he currently lives on and writes.
And something to note about Vox, by the way, that is Vox, V-O-X, not Fox, Vox Media.
Vox.
I mean, I don't know exactly what his stake was in Vox when it got started, but they have continued to grow as well as get multiple rounds of investment. I don't know what their valuation is, but it is safe to assume that Matt Yglesias is able to afford a very comfortable lifestyle based on the money that has been put into Vox over the years, as well as the additional value from acquiring other companies.
Yeah, I mean, he's been in this like writing sphere for a long time, ever since like the early 2000s. Pretty much like his whole life has been just writing about politics and blogging. He started blogging, went on to Vox, and then went back to blogging on his own personal site. But no, he's that's his whole deal basically. And leading up to the 2020 election, I thought this came out actually after Biden had won, but after looking a little bit more, he wrote this entire book and finished writing it like a couple of weeks before the 2020 election, which I think puts a lot of like his framework that he works in this book in a really interesting new light. The thing I think that's like the most interesting about this book is because he, I think, correctly identified that Trump probably was going to lose the 2020 election. I watched an interview of him saying as much, like right before it happened. So I think what this book really was in his mind was like the future that liberals could take to like bring us back to that like good old 1990s Democratic like majority that Bill Clinton had.
Who didn't love the Clinton years, right?
Yeah,
the end,
those were the good times.
Right. It was the end of history, and everything being accomplished through this centrist, consensus-based policy that sort of aspired to a means-tested liberalism, I guess.
Yeah. And I mean, he was right insofar as Trump lost, but I feel like he didn't really consider a world where Trump lost, but then would come back even stronger, further to the right, and would win again. I didn't expect that to happen. I don't think many people did. But a lot of this book just feels very naive in the face of where we're at right now in 2025.
Absolutely.
So that also might I think influence some of the ways I analyzed, especially the way he writes in this book, some of the rhetoric he uses to get across some of his ideas. Before we get into the book, I think what this episode is going to be is like mostly just a discussion of like the different sections of this book, because I think it's like a generally fine book. That was like the stunning thing while I was reading this. I'm like, a lot of the things he puts in this book aren't like bad ideas. Like they're generally like fine, progressive ideas. But the thing that like immediately caught me off guard with this book, especially in the introduction and the beginning of the first chapter, is that it feels like he's trying to do this like weird liberal nationalism. He's trying to like do that whole Hillary Clinton thing where it's like, if we just say, oh, and like, I guess what Kamala Harris ended up doing too, where it's like, we have to be number one. He does that a lot. He talks about how America has to be number one and how we need to be the hegemonic powerhouse of the world still.
I've got a quote here from the intro. The United States has been the number one power in the world throughout my entire lifetime and throughout the living memory of essentially everyone on the planet today. The notion that this state of affairs is desirable and ought to persist is one of the least controversial things you could say in American politics today.
Which, like, is probably correct in terms of like politicians. But like, no, the framework there is that it's like inherently a moral good that America is number one. And like, maybe we like on the left, because we're Matt's left here, maybe we just sort of have that inherent suspicion of American exceptionalism. Because I mean, like, look at what we've done, especially since this book has been published, helping Israel in the genocide of Palestine. Like there's just so much of America's history globally, especially, and even just back in home, where it's like, sure, we've done a lot of things and we've built a lot of things, but we also have like a really horrible history. So it's weird that he's talking about this and just like hand waving that away.
Well, and what's even stranger to me is not actually the claim itself that America is morally good. That's a debatable claim. Fine, whatever. There's pros and cons to that. And at the end of the day, if you want to say that and then support stuff on top of that and simply say, it is my opinion that this, and then give a couple examples and then say, based on this premise, blah, 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 blah. That's fine. You can do that. What's very strange is that he says that this is an uncontroversial premise, because it's not. That is a factually inaccurate claim. That is not an opinion that I disagree with. That's just not true. And this happens in this book time and time and time again, where he will present an opinion of his as being completely uncontroversial, even though it's not.
And even it's funny that he does do that, because even at one point in the book, he even says, oh, people to my left might disagree. And it's like, so it's not like uncontroversial.
So people disagree with you.
You acknowledged it. Yeah. So there's a lot of like weird framing devices and a lot of weird. And so it's something I think that's fairly odd that I didn't even really notice until we started, but right before we started recording, is that there's a lot of errors in this book, like a lot of strange errors that I don't even know how they were missed before they were published. Again, in the introduction, I'm going to read off the quote.
Yeah, we're still in the intro at this point. We are still using Roman numerals rather than page numbers and Arabic numerals.
Yeah, we're on XIV.
That's 14 for those of you keeping track at home.
So he says, when America faced down Nazi Germany and the Soviet Union, we were the big dog. We had more people, more wealth, and more industrial capacity. And like, he's kind of correct about like the wealth and the industrial capacity. We did have more at that time, but I feel like him being wrong about the basic fact that the USSR had more people throughout its entire lifespan as a country.
Well, up until some of those other countries cleaved off of the USSR at the very, very end. But other than that, the USSR, even with all of the population losses during World War II, with like the fucking siege of Stalingrad and all that, was still a more populous country than the United States.
Yeah, and the reason why, like, that might seem sort of a nitpicky thing to be wrong about, but I think it's like a very illustrative thing. Like, I think it's very illustrative of why this whole argument is just very odd. Like this whole 1 billion American argument. Because if the premise is that like more people will ensure the longevity and victory long term, like that's just not true, bared out by the basic facts here. Like if that were true, the USSR would have probably won the Cold War, which is just not what happened.
Well, because if you want to talk about industrial capacity, certainly up until like the 70s, the USSR also had an advantage in terms of overall industrial capability, particularly in terms of their ability to marshal industrial resources to a given end. And so it's not true. This just isn't true.
And I think he does try to like sort of dance around that by being like, well, capitalism, that all this means is capitalism is better than communism. And it's like, well, I guess that's like a fair assumption for him to continue to make. Like capitalism did sadly win that war. But if the argument here is that more people equals better, that's just not that it just doesn't track.
Right.
His argument doesn't track here. But I think there is one thing about this whole premise that he's somewhat correct about, is that China has seen massive growth in the last couple of decades, right? Like China is doing things that I will see China put out videos of like a new bridge they make or some sort of new technology. They are living in the future over there right now.
That bridge they just finished? Did you see that thing?
I did. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. And it cuts off like 3 hours of driving around that mountain just with that single bridge. So it's like there is this basic truth, I think, that if you have more people, you can just like do more things. I think that like what I will give credit to Matt Yglesias is he's like just generally correct about that. But it doesn't necessarily ensure things will always be good, because I feel like it buys into the like line goes up mindset where it's like, oh, line continues to go up means always good. I don't necessarily, there's just, I think all of this to say is that he makes a lot of assumptions right off the bat to just like get into what this book really is. It's just like a policy agenda.
Well, and to that point as well about how even the population thing isn't necessarily enough. The entire reason that China implemented the one-child policy is that population there was growing too quickly for services to be able to keep up. Now it's kind of tipped the other way. Now fertility rates in China are well below replacement rate, but it seems that the party's happy with that for the time being because it gives them the opportunity to catch up to providing enough services for the population that exists, and then presumably they'll be able to do some programs to turn the lever back the other way once that becomes necessary again.
And I think more importantly too, like with China, is that they actually have like the political will to go through with projects. Like at one point, people love to point to the baby boom. It's like, oh, like why was there a baby boom? It's like there was a lot of economic growth, but there was also a lot of government programs.
Well, it's because we went to war, June.
It's because we killed everyone. But no, I think like I don't know for sure, but if I had to take a good guess, it's because FDR did a lot of post-war projects with the political will that he had. There was so much growth from the government, and that's just like not really happening these days in America. And I think he just doesn't really. I think he sees that a little bit, because he does say at one point America needs some sort of shared national project to move forward.
Yglesias does desire more public works, and he says as much in the pages of this book.
Which is, I respect that genuinely. Like I wouldn't have expected that from him, from what I know of him and his politics. He throws aside the culture war grievances that you see a lot on the right too, which I do agree with. Of course, like the right uses a lot of culture war to distract from a lot of what's going on. But I think he takes this a little too far. He's of that current Democratic Party mindset where it's like we just shouldn't acknowledge the culture war at all, which I think is just a mistake. Mm-hmm. You can't just ignore the culture war. You can't just act like the right is not trying to like deport every human possible. That's not going to work. You can't just ignore it and have it go away. You can't outlogic them to beat them in that topic.
It also gets in the way of a desire for more population growth if you don't take these things about deportation and so forth seriously. We'll get to this a little bit later, but I also found that a little odd.
Yeah. You know, I think the introduction sort of lays out most of the book. And I feel very strongly about this book just in the introduction here. So he has a quote here that I think is just very, it says a lot about, I think, how he's using this framing device of 1 billion Americans to just sort of try to convince people that he and his agenda in this book are correct. So he says here, the difference is there are 130 million Mexicans, 330 million Americans, and 1,300 million Chinese people. And to stay on top, we need 1 billion Americans. I think the thing that like really grabs me here is that there is like there is no other way to do this, which it's like, I mean, surely there is. I feel like he is sort of like going into this book. I thought this was like mostly going to be about like fertility and like the birth rate. I thought that's where it was mostly going to go, but it becomes clear very quickly that it's just sort of a convenient framing device to talk about an agenda to that like the Democratic Party should go into and like enact.
Yeah, well, because something that I think is really notable about that is he doesn't really define what being on top even means.
He doesn't.
He just sort of, again, a lot of these things that he takes for granted and assumes that everybody else takes for granted is that the American way of life is great. Everybody loves the American way of life. There's not a lot that we need to do in terms of changing the basic standard of living or quality of living or style of living that we have. There are technocratic adjustments that can be made to provide more funding for people who are in poverty or otherwise have needs, but there's nothing fundamentally wrong with the way that America works. We just need to do that thing but better and more. I mean, he says in a paragraph also in the introduction, the good news is that for all its many flaws, our country has a much healthier political and economic system than China's, which again, it's like, yes, this was written 5 years ago, but in October 2025, that is a ludicrous claim. Like that is facially obscene.
And it's again, like it was a different time, but the idea that he couldn't have predicted the reality that we were in, like sure, January 6th didn't happen yet. But I feel like anyone could have guessed that at that time in 2020, we had watched Donald Trump be president already. The idea that like just beating Donald Trump and all of a sudden that fascism was going to vanish is just crazy. That's crazy.
He figured it would be a hard reset. He goes on to say one advantage the United States has over China is that because it is a beacon of freedom to the world rather than, this is my favorite part, an increasingly dystopian oligarchy. It's definitely not that. It's definitely not that.
No. So it's like, it's, no, I feel your frustration because there's so much, I feel like it's him saying stuff like that, like the very nationalistic, jingoistic stuff is really front loaded. He says a lot of this in the intro, and I think it's on purpose, right? I think what he's trying to do here is that the conservatives, any potential conservative reading this will be like, oh, this is a good patriotic American, right? Like, I gotta listen to him. He's patriotic. Like, he's trying to like, I think what he's like really trying to do is he's like trying to, I mean, I think he does believe these things he's writing down.
Yes.
But I think he is also saying these things these way because he thinks he can like trick conservatives into like a different belief.
Yes. That he's going to debate brain his way into like, I won the argument. But the problem is that, just on the merits, his arg sucks. He's not using good evidence to back up his claims. And from a rhetorical perspective, he's not thinking big enough for it to be one of those things where it's like, well, I don't know how the details are going to get sorted, but I love the vision. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And that's like the most you could say about this book because there's not very many details within this book. And so to round out the introduction, before we move on from the introduction, at the end, he sort of starts talking about that America is not full, the idea that America is not full. And it's like, it's genuinely, it's sort of an interesting frame of thought because like, I mean, I guess on the surface, he's kind of right. There's a lot of like empty space with nothing in the country. Like density is quite a bit lower than most countries. But again, the way he uses this is like, I don't know. It's so frustrating to me because he's like not wrong. I feel like I'm going to be saying that a lot in this book where it's like he's not necessarily wrong.
No,
but he's making a crazy assumption that this should be done, that this is like the way it has to be done.
And his understanding of the situation is incomplete, right? Like, speaking for myself as something like, I don't claim to be an expert on any of this shit, but like, I know, for instance, that these relatively unpopulated parts of the country, it's not as if people could just go there and start moving in and it would be chill because like, if you talk about a state like Wyoming, for instance, all of that land is either going to be federally owned and operated or owned by ranchers who are not going to be happy to give up that land land unless there is a significant amount of incentive to do so. And those incentives could exist, but you'd have to put together a plan for why those incentives would want to exist and be interesting. And he seems to have no interest in doing that.
And not even just talking about like the completely empty land, but there's a lot of cities in the United States that he does recognize are sort of destitute and falling apart. But it's not like you can just start choosing to move to these places, like just sort of incentivize people to move there and expect things to just improve. There's places, especially West Virginia, that are very destitute for a reason. You know, they're not good. It's not good that it's like that, but there's like a drug abuse, the opioid crisis, the coal industry, and life expectancy in specifically West Virginia. Like there's so many different factors here. The book would be a lot crazier and longer if he did address those things, but I feel like leaving some of these different factors out and talking very large, like very thinking of at it at such a high level that he is, it just doesn't really work. It doesn't really hit. Like it's always just like sort of an interesting idea, but it's just like, all right, but how do you do it? I don't really fucking know. I don't really fucking know. So introduction, fucking insane. I feel like that was like reading the introduction was one of the most mad I was reading this book. So let's get into like the actual meat of the book here. So he divides us into 3 parts. Part 1 is the problem. The very first chapter, again, sort of goes into more jingoistic patriotism. He's just talking about like the history of American power, which he just assumes everyone agrees is a good thing and should continue indefinitely forever. There's like this really weird moment in this chapter where he talks about how China is a real growing threat to the US hegemony. But then later on, at the end of this whole section, he's like, but all of these statistics about China are fake somehow.
Yeah, make up your fucking mind, dude.
Yeah, he says here, in China's case, contrivances are put together by an authoritarian political system with no free speech, free press, or opposition political party to question the official data. Consequently, almost everyone thinks Chinese economic statistics are somewhat fake, where it's like, it's weird to like call all this fake, but also watch their intense growth right at the same time. Like it just doesn't, his like questioning of all of this data seems to just not bear out with reality at all.
Well, and I don't know enough about the official Chinese numbers on anything to speak. I don't know enough. Like, I'm not there. I can't speak to how accurate the numbers are, right? Yeah. But there is a big difference between the numbers have been fudged to make it look more impressive than it really is, which I imagine is probably true. I think pretty much all countries do that.
Absolutely. Probably, yeah.
There's a big difference between that and all of this shit is fake and gay, which is what he seems to be saying at this point.
Yeah, absolutely.
By the way, also to the point of inconsistencies in this book, I noticed that right here in chapter 1, he does say that the Soviet Union maintained a population that was larger than America.
Yes.
Who fucking edited this thing?
He switched it up. No, whoever, I don't know. I don't want to like dunk on the copy editor too much, but there's so many, no, but there's so many inconsistencies, typos too. There's like a couple of typos.
Yeah. So like one fantastic little typo that I found is on page 111, which I think is supposed to say that the Cuban economy was facing a sharp downturn. Instead, it says that the Cuban economy was facing a sharp downtown.
Come on, man. But I think just within chapter 1, then, it really became quickly, you know, I was looking forward to seeing like his takes about like birth rate and like natalism. Yeah. Just like, you know, I wanted to see what the liberal take on this was, because there's a lot of takes from the right on this topic. I haven't seen like, there's not a ton on the left or liberals, but what this book really is, and it's like the most obvious in this chapter, it becomes very obvious very quickly that it's not about natalism per se. Like you can claim it is what the agenda he puts forward, but what this book really is like a liberal attempt to recapture the nationalistic spirit of the country, because there was a lot of discussion at this
time. Of the United States of America.
Yeah.
And there's very little in the way of like nuts and bolts comparisons to other countries. Yeah. There's a part later on where he talks about like Finnish baby boxes, in that there are American companies who sell baby boxes that are sort of modeled after the Finland example.
But that doesn't even solve the problem.
That doesn't solve the problem. And that also is pretty much all we ever hear about any like way of making child rearing easier anywhere.
Yeah.
It's just, it's so lazy.
And like the thing is, again, is that idea with like the Finnish system is not bad, but the problem is that like people can't buy the things in the box, so the government provides those things. So he's like, oh, the solution is companies sell them. And it's like, people can't buy these things. There's a reason why like people can't take care of kids. They're not willing to have kids because they can't take care of kids.
They can't fucking afford it, right?
Yeah, they can't fucking afford it. Which he, again, to his credit, he does acknowledge that there is a rise of cost for taking care of children. I just feel like he insufficiently addresses like what to do or what are the good ideas that can be implemented to actually do it in America.
Well, the book is such a grab bag of different problems that he doesn't have enough space to, well, I guess he could have enough space if he were to write like a really long book, but with the scope of what he's covering, he's not able to drill down to any real solutions and like compare the pros and cons because he has to move on to the next fucking thing.
Because really all this is like a policy agenda book. This was the previous attempt among like this sphere of like, I haven't read this book yet. I'm still planning on it just because I find it interesting, these topics interesting. But the Derek Thompson book that just came out in 2025, Abundance, I feel like he intended this book to be what that book actually did for like the Democratic Party circles. It was like a manifesto for the party. He didn't really achieve it, I don't think, very well, especially in retrospect here. So that's like chapter 1. It's mostly just like weird things. It's like weird nationalism. And in chapter 2...
USA number 1, fuck China.
Yeah, fuck China. Everything about China is fake. Chapter 2, he starts talking about how America is empty. And like, you know, we sort of talked about that already. I think it's like, again, it's an interesting idea that like there is all of this space. Like there still could be a lot of growth, and not even just like out in Wyoming or whatever, but like cities can still grow. It's not like Chicago could be done growing. There could be a lot of growth in Chicago. New York might be a little bit harder specifically. It's a very large city already.
But more of his focus throughout this book is on underpopulated cities that used to be more populated, like pretty much the entire Great Lakes corridor. Yeah,
which I think, I mean, I think he does correctly identify that there is a lot of growth potential there. I mean, Chicago, one thing I will say about Chicago, like since I've started living here, is I've noticed there's been a lot of new developments in the neighborhood I live in. There's a big new apartment building that just opened up a couple of weeks ago. There's a new single family home that opened up just like down the road from me. So there is like a lot of actual like building happening in the city. So like maybe, I don't know, maybe he's happy with that. But it also feels like he thinks there should be mega cities in like Nebraska. Like he's like, we could have a Chicago of Nebraska. And it's like, well, not really. It already
exists. It's called Omaha. But the other thing to that point, and this is a little later on in the book that I want to talk about this as well, he doesn't really understand how or why cities grow. He doesn't seem to understand the fundamentals of urbanism. And so his call to sort of repopulate these cities, well, again, I think appealing on paper and sensible, that is not matched with a policy agenda that makes any sort of sense whatsoever.
Yeah, I mean, there like we said already, there's a reason why some of these areas, especially, I mean, West Virginia, I think is the easiest example. At a certain point, they had a much bigger purpose in the United States economy. Nowadays, they just really don't in the same way that they used to.
And absent meaningful reinvestment, that frankly needs to be controlled on the national level. It must be invested in at a national level with national direct investment and subsidies. It's just not going to happen.
Definitely not. And in this chapter, there was a quote here in this chapter, there was a quote here that I thought was just very odd. Like, I don't know why he put it this way. And it's just sort of that thing that I think he's trying to do throughout this whole book of tricking conservatives into thinking he's like this really rah-rah patriotic guy. So he says, "A billion Americans won't turn the country into an overcrowded wasteland. It'll be like France, less packed than Germany or Italy. It won't be nearly as dense as the UK, and we almost certainly couldn't become as dense as England no matter how hard we tried. Like any patriotic American, I have my doubts about all of those countries. Some don't put enough ice in their drinks, and some have weird ventless dryers that don't actually dry clothing. But they're all perfectly pleasant places that people from all over the world visit happily." And it's like, what are you doing here, man?
He's spitting about the ice, though. He's so valid for that one.
Is he? I've never visited the Europe, so I actually don't know about that.
I'm afraid he is. But okay, this is also kind of interesting because when you talk about the habitability of different countries, as an example, in that very chapter, he notes that, like, yeah, the UK is population dense, but there are parts of the UK that are not dense, such as Scotland.
Yeah.
And then if you look at a topographical map of Scotland, it becomes pretty immediately clear why that is the case, which is to say that the further north you get, the more mountainous it gets and the more like crazy islands there are that would make it actually very, very difficult to inhabit in the same way that is more habitable the further south that you get. And when you look at the United States, you have to think about the fact that a solid fucking chunk of the country is largely uninhabitable mountain terrain and desert, which he doesn't think about or consider at all.
Which there's a lot of fucking desert on the west coast, or close to the west coast of the United States. He doesn't even mention it.
The fact that the land exists doesn't make it habitable.
And he also does, this is the first instance that he does through this entire book in chapter 2. It starts here. And it's one of the most infuriating aspects of this whole book, aside from the weird, patriotism aspect of this whole thing. But he starts to just disregard every argument about climate change.
Yes.
He acknowledges that, sure, if we have all this growth, climate change will increase. There will be a lot more factors that would increase our carbon footprint. But he just is sort of but that's fine, right? He doesn't really he finds those arguments about climate change unconvincing. He doesn't really think that we should care about that at all.
I think my favorite quote in the entire book is in this chapter, actually, right after he gets done hand waving the fact that even renewables require batteries and we're not all the way there yet in terms of the technology. And he basically talks about it'll be fine. We'll figure it out. And then he says, obviously, this is all a gross simplification, and there is an enormous amount that could be said about the details here. And that is this book in a nutshell.
Yes, that should be the subhead of this book. That would literally be the perfect subheader for this book, because that literally is every chapter. He could put that at the start of every chapter, and he would be he's correct. There could be a lot more said about all of this, actually.
Because in the very next paragraph, he goes on to say, it can't be denied that 1 billion Americans would mean higher emissions, largely because America is a rich country with high living standards, but it doesn't really make any of the fundamentals problems we need to solve any harder. But if the standard of living still requires that level of per capita carbon emissions, it certainly does make the problem harder. It makes the problem 3 times more difficult.
Which would really increase the problem. I mean, currently China, I think, is still the biggest output for carbon. Or sorry,
in total, yes, in total, but not per capita.
They are not per capita, but in total. And they have flatlined. They're actually on the decrease right now. Right. I think that just was starting to happen when he wrote this book. But that would solidly put the United States way over where China is right now, especially per capita. Oh my God. Yeah. And that's, again, one of the most consistent thing in this book is his disregard for climate change concerns. And I think that's perfect way to end chapter 2. Chapter 3, I think this is my favorite chapter for a couple of reasons we'll get to in a minute. But this chapter is titled The Dismal Economics of Child Rearing, which I think he's he identifies most of the problems, I think, that I agree with about why people generally in the United States have less kids these days, is because everyone's economics are fucked. People don't really have money to raise children. And I think that's really, especially in 2025, really on its face, we're looking down a recession, maybe even worse, a depression. People don't have money. People are losing their jobs. I think the economic factor of the problem with decreased birth rate I think those are really intertwined. And I think he does a good job here. I'll give him some credit. I think he does a good job of identifying some of those problems.
Yeah.
On the flip side here, though, I feel this illustrates why I do not like Matt Yglesias at all, or the way he talks about politics and the way he thinks politics should happen. Because so about halfway through this chapter, he starts talking about how the right has also been talking about the birth rate and what we should do or what they think they should do to increase the birth rate.
Yeah, it's a classic thing that he does throughout where he's well, some people say this on the left, but on the other hand, some people on the right think this.
And I could not fucking believe my eyes when the example he uses for a good old conservative who's right on the issues, who's good faith about all of the things he believes. So I'm going to read his quote here that I'm going to scream. I'm going to scream. I'm looking it down already.
Just lean away from the mic to scream. Yeah.
So he says, one reason for this allergy is a belief in some circles that talking about reproduction is per se racist. Marissa Brostoff, an editor at Jewish Currents, for example, published a WAPO op-ed arguing that conservative lawmakers and right-wing vigilantes alike have adopted a seemingly new language for describing their anti-abortion stance, the white nationalist discourse of the Great Replacement, a conspiracy theory that holds that non-white immigrants are demographically replacing whites throughout the West. She brought up some solid evidence to the table for that thesis, but in the course of doing so, she swept the conservative writer, J.D. Vance, who has an Indian American wife and a multiracial son, into
that
the
means
critique.
He can't be racist.
No, he can't be racist, obviously. So he continues, swept him up into the critique simply based on statements he had made in worrying about the American birth rate. Would you believe it?
I
J.D.
can't believe
Vance,
it. I'm so
racist?
glad you pulled this paragraph in because I also highlighted this, and my note on this is in all caps, sucker! This guy is such an absolute rube.
He is. I think this more than anything shows that he just cannot understand that people talk in dog whistle. I feel like throughout this book, he doesn't take climate change seriously, but the thing he takes even less seriously is the growing white supremacist threat in this country. The fact that white supremacy is growing.
Yeah. And concerns on the left that the white supremacy is growing, right? He's not happy to just be like, well, I think that there are some very fine people, right? He has to be like, well, this left writer said this, but she also brought in J.D. Vance. How fucking dare she?
How dare you? A simple conservative writer.
And Marissa Brostoff, if you're listening to this, shout outs to you because you called this shit way ahead of time before anybody else saw what that guy J.D. Vance's deal was. Good for you.
And I think some people at the time, I never really liked J.D. Vance, but there was a really common thing among the technocratic liberal sphere, like Matt Yglesias, all these people that just were like, oh, we really like J.D. Vance. He's the reasonable conservative. He's a smart guy. He's not Trump.
It was the whole Yale thing, right? That's fundamentally what it came down to. I mean, this just reminds me of a post that I saw today from the Hell Dude. Shout outs to the Hell Dude on Blue Sky saying, sure, it's frighteningly easy to manipulate Trump, but somehow Vance is even worse. He will be and do anything his handlers dictate. Marry a South Asian and write a book about being a hick? Yes, Mistress Chua. That, of course, is talking about Amy Chua from Yale. Convert to Catholicism and be a Nazi? Yes, Master Teal. Terrifying cipher of a man. Yeah,
because it's all about power. It's really all about power for the right. And that's just not the way that Matt Yglesias, I think, especially at this time, conceptualized the right. I think he and a lot of people thought that Trump was just a singular guy doing these things, and everyone was just caught up in the wave. And it's very clear these days. Maybe we're this mad because of how the country's gone, and it's so obvious now. But I feel even at the time, anyone who's praising J.D. Vance is why we're partially here.
Absolutely.
People like Matt Yglesias who were like, oh, J.D. Vance, he just has concerns about the American birth rate, not white birth rate. It's you're fucking stupid, dude. I'm sorry. Come on. You're part of the problem here.
I think that's why it's so interesting looking at this now. Because in general, it's very interesting to read books that were published a little while ago that were looking forward. Because everybody is going to make mistakes, right? Everybody is going to get some prognostications wrong. That's the nature of trying to analyze sort of the future.
Yeah.
But it's so clear that this guy, it's not just that he was willing to grant good faith to people who were clearly operating in bad faith. It's that he was willing to bring those arguments into his own arg as something that would bolster it, right? As ammunition. That's crazy.
It's crazy. And it happens so much in this book where he's just flat wrong or just discounts the actual threat of the things he's talking about. Another person, speaking of someone giving undue credit, he name drops Lyman Stone. He cites Lyman Stone, who we have talked about a little bit on the show.
Yeah, friend of the show. How you doing, Lyman?
and he really seems to want to bolster up there's some reasonable people to the right of me who are also talking about this thing. And anyone who has concerns about this, fuck off.
It's West Wing brain, right? It's Sorkin brain.
Yeah, it is very Sorkin brain. And I just can't help but just feel this sort of thinking, especially with J.D. Vance, is why we're where we're at right now.
Yeah,
it's
agreed.
Because of these people. And I think, it just pisses me off, man. It peeves me off. I'm upset about this. I'm mad.
Reading something like this too, not only does it piss me off, it makes me realize that like when I get that feeling in my gut, you know, about somebody,
trust it. Yes.
Trust that fucking feeling.
100%. And, you know, if Peter Thiel funding your entire world like he did with JD Vance wasn't an immediate red flag, says a lot about people like Matt Yglesias, I think. So that rounds out the first part of this book. So how are you feeling about the first part here, Josh? Right now, I'm fucking pissed.
Oh, I'm feeling terrible. Yeah, no, I'm not feeling good at all. I'm looking at my Labubu in an attempt to try to calm down, you know?
Yeah. So part two. So part one was the problems. He identified a lot of the problems and said a lot of insane things. Part two is about the solutions.
Yes.
And to me, this is sort of the least interesting part of the book because it was just sort of him listing different policies he likes throughout like all of the 3 chapters here, which a lot of them, again, like I said, are like good. Okay. A lot of them are fine.
That's interesting because to me, I actually found this the most interesting section.
Really? Okay.
Not because what he's saying is interesting, but because he doesn't... This is sort of what I was saying earlier, that like... He doesn't seem to be particularly interested in the nuts and bolts of the solutions and what they would entail. And for me, if I were writing a book about a policy matter that I really, really cared about, I would want to make damn sure that I was looking at every single possible thing and looking at the pros and cons. Whereas he seems to be basically throwing in some things and being like, yeah, this will fix it. And I just don't think that there's utility in that, frankly.
No,
I think
not.
that any good faith consideration of anything requires looking at the pros and cons because everything has those. And then what you have to do is look at those things and be like, on the balance, I think these solutions are better than these solutions. And here's why. Here's the ones that I think are really good. Here's the ones that I think are really bad. Here's the ones that I think could be useful in some circumstances. He doesn't really do that. He just kind of points to things that are possibilities and are like, yeah.
No, that's a good point. I mean, I think that's maybe why I thought it was the least interesting because it just feels like he is just like writing a blog post, which is, I guess, like what a book sort of is.
What is a book but a blog on paper?
Yeah. And it's like, and like, but you know, you're right though. It's interesting in the sense that it goes to show just where his mind is. He doesn't really care about the nuts and bolts. He's not even really doing a rhetoric thing. There's not like really clever rhetoric at all in this part of this book. He's just sort of talking.
Yeah, no,
he's just
it's
like sort of talking. Like he's just aimlessly wandering through different policies.
He's like, yeah, Matt and Elizabeth Brunig wrote something on their blog. That's kind of interesting. Some people talk about the idea of a universal child allowance in the USA. That's kind of interesting.
Like, oh, wow, the child tax credit? That's cool.
Head Start is a thing that exists. Huh, how about that?
Chapter 4, it's titled Taking Families Seriously. It has a lot of that in here. But there is like maybe one of the most insane proposals in this entire book. And I'm probably going to say that a couple more times because there's a lot of like bare bones, just sort of like, a baby bonus. That's interesting. Mm-hmm. But then he proposes things like switching from a summer vacation school year program to a round year full on never like school system. There's different countries that have no summer vacation for schools. He proposes here. He says this. Switching to year-round schooling from the status quo would be easier said than done. Oh, wow. That's awesome.
Oh, okay.
Cool. And then he can... he does that all the time in this book. It drives me crazy. But he continues. Many school buildings are not equipped with appropriate climate control for this hot summer months. You couldn't just ask teachers and other school staff to significantly extend their annual working hours without also offering them higher salaries, to say nothing of dealing with the myriad collective bargaining agreements that would need to be changed. That's a lot of fucking things that you would have to deal with in this situation. And then he continues. And because the whole existing teacher workforce is composed of people who deliberately bought into teachers' unusual work schedules and have built lives around them, even that trade-off wouldn't necessarily be straightforward. But with all of that, he still is like, yeah, we should try it. We should do it.
And then he goes on to advocate for like, if only there were schools that tried this. And it's like, there are schools that do this.
They're all over the world.
And in the United States. Like there are schools that do this in the United States.
No, it's frustrating because he's like, I wonder if this could be a good or a bad thing. And it's like, there are examples of these schools existing that you could look at.
And,
like,
and
he
see
just doesn't
and
do
find
it. He
out. You
doesn't
can do the
it.
research. And again, this is something where I don't know enough about this to weigh in one direction or the other. Maybe it is a good idea. But also, if you want to support that premise further, you then have to talk about why the shift would be worth all of these costs. What are the long-term benefits that you get despite this short-term pain? And also, why is mounting political capital for this change on a nationwide level, which, by the way, you couldn't fucking do because of the way that school works in this country? You would have to get this done at the state level. You couldn't just say the United States is going to now switch over to, which again, I don't know if he even knows that. I don't even know if he understands that. I don't think he thought about the fact that, in fact, doing this would require states, all 50 of them, to change on this matter.
It was around this part of the book that I like your frustration that you have here sort of is like what the frustration I had. And it sort of clicked in my mind that the way he thinks the government works is just like backwards. Like, I feel like he thinks that we need the only way to grow this country and like have projects happen is to like have more people and then we'll go ahead and do these projects. When it's like we were a growing country and still are, by the way, we are still a growing population due to immigration. Like we are still getting more people in this country every year. We're not like declining currently. So the idea that like, especially under Trump right now, they are defunding so many different aspects of this entire country. I mean, like the one right now that's on like the biggest piece of the news right now with the government shutdown is SNAP benefits expiring and like healthcare premiums jumping up by next year.
And I'm sure you saw too that like there was just a federal judge that ordered that the U.S. government do in fact pay those funds out for SNAP. We'll see how that shakes out. I'm sure it's going to go to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court is going to be like, actually, he can do whatever he wants, because that's how it's gone so far. But
no, I think this just like illustrates where it's like it's a policy problem. It's like a government doing things problem. It's not because we have like less white people being born or whatever. Like we're not losing funding because the birth rate is falling. We're losing funding because the government is like failing us. The government is failing us. That's what's happening.
Yes, and I would say it is a misunderstanding of how power works. It's getting power backwards as well.
Yes.
His thought is like, well, if we simply show that from a practical perspective, a year-round school year makes more sense economically than summer vacation, we'll just be able to change it. No, that's not how this works. The only thing that matters is if you have control, is if you have power.
Yes.
And you could potentially marshal power around this idea, maybe. But in terms of things that are going to motivate people to make a meaningful policy change, I think year-round school is not one of those. Again, to go back to China, which he is so afraid of, but also thinks is not a problem at the same time, the reason that they have had so much success is that they can just do things. And it turns out that also in the United States, you can just do things. As long as you're willing to exercise the power that has been vested in you, even if you don't have the actual will of the majority, which Trump definitely does not.
No, I feel like that's like what we're witnessing right now in 2025 is just like a bullet in this technocratic frame of mind. It totally just tears down the reality that a lot of these people lived in, where you just have to turn the right knobs, like just twist the right knobs, dials, all of these things, and everything will be like perfect. We'll get like the perfect future if we just perfectly align everything. That's just not how it works, clearly. And it's really fucking sad that the first time in my life as an adult, the first person who has the political will to do things for political power purposes is doing things to destroy everything, to continue to defund everything. And I don't want to give credit to Donald Trump, but I really hope that some of these people see what he's doing and really internalize that the technocratic ideology is just false. It's just not the world we can operate in. We can work in a much different world if we had the political will.
People are ultimately driven by material needs. And the way that you can do an end run around that, if you're Donald Trump, is by distracting them from their material needs in favor of something else, or by saying that your material needs and the shortcoming in your material needs is driven by them, right? And if we get rid of them, that will solve the problem. The only way that you can countervail that narrative is by saying, no, actually, your material needs are going to be better if we do X, Y, and Z things, and we can do them together. And to the point of just go back to the year-round school thing again, you would have to make a convincing argument that everybody's material needs would be benefited. You would need to talk about how it would allow you to maybe spend more time with your kids, or how all these things. But he just sort of hand waves away that, like, there are a lot of teachers for whom this would significantly shift their material circumstances in terms of when they work, how they work, and things like that. And you would have to prove to them that it would ultimately be beneficial. You couldn't just be like, well, overall, it's going to be better for the economy. That's not how this works.
Because, he does say, like, their schools tend to be the center of community, but like he just doesn't convincingly outline these things. And I think to move on to the next bit, I think what you're talking about like the culture war. I think you're getting at the culture war here. I think this chapter is this next chapter. So he talks about immigrants in chapter 5.
Right.
And I think it's really interesting. Again,
More and Better Immigrants is the name of the chapter. And I think that's fucking wild. We need better like immigrants.
Better. And then also like, better. What does he mean by better? Right off the bat, it's a weird start with that title because it feels very like, again, sort of like talking like there are bad immigrants, which it's weird because like even in this chapter, he doesn't even really say that. He seems to want as many immigrants as possible.
I disagree.
Like his general,
I think he very much does grant the premise of the desirable immigrant and what that looks like. I've actually got a quote here.
Oh yeah, please.
Given the extent to which cultural, or to be blunt, racial fears seem to drive much of immigration politics, it might be interesting to explore the idea of fairly free and open immigration from Canada, Australia, the Anglophone Caribbean, America's NATO allies, or some other subset of countries that seems popular.
Oh my God, I didn't even catch that.
You missed that?
I missed that. No.
He gave the game away with that one.
No, he's like, see, okay, this again just goes to my thought of this whole book. Oh, this just reinforces it even more. That he's framing up a lot of these arguments to appeal to conservatives.
Yes.
To like be like, oh, we're going to trick you into like believing these immigration is good because we're going to bring more white immigrants. We want like that'll like quash your fears, right? That'll make you guys stop.
White and or English speakers. He's okay with Caribbean immigrants, but only if they're from Anglophone countries, right? God. So if you're from Jamaica or the Bahamas, you're fine. But if you're from fucking Haiti, forget about it.
Okay, now that makes the title make way more sense to me now. Holy shit. No, the thing that this chapter also does is the thing that we've been saying that he does this whole time, where he just thinks he can out logic conservatives. He's like,
yes,
I think he like does like immigration. Of course, it seems like he likes white immigration just a little bit more, but he doesn't take seriously that like the people on the right really care about that. Like he doesn't really question the fact that like, oh, there's like this new conspiracy theory. Oh, like white nationalism. That's kind of odd. He doesn't really address that in any way. He does say that like the right uses the fear of immigration to like make cuts to different welfare programs by like othering and using them as the enemy, but he doesn't really take that on in any convincing way.
No, and there are some very interesting underlying assumptions too about what he thinks immigration even is.
Yeah.
I want to read another paragraph here.
Yeah, go for it.
Under the current paradigm, activists and members of Congress fear that more immigration of any kind will automatically mean squeezing out immigrants from Latin America. But it doesn't need to work that way. If there are groups of people it would be sensible to let in, an effort should be made to build political support for granting them permission. After all, on the merits, different kinds of immigrants are complementary to one another. If we have more highly educated professionals moving here, then we will also have more demand for cooks and roofers and nannies and all the rest. The key point is that immigration is much more beneficial than many realize.
It's very clear what he thinks is like high skill immigration or like high priority immigration, and it's like, oh, and then the lowly workers, the like, oh, the simple workers who will support the like high skill, the very important.
That's their station. We need those fucking Trinidadian nannies to support the, I don't know, rich Mexican bankers. Like,
yeah, no, this chapter, I think of these three in his solutions section, I think is like the most just like, oh, this fucking sucks, man. This fucking sucks. Oh, I hate this chapter now. I didn't realize it was as bad until you laid out that first quote. Jesus Christ.
He also says at one point, another idea that might be attractive in some contexts would be to make immigrants pay higher payroll taxes than natives.
What? What does he mean? What does he mean? Why? Oh, he has to like Trump's current immigration plan. Trump's sort of doing not that, but like, you know, the Trump gold card, making higher barriers to entry to get the like higher skill, wealthier immigrant.
He seems to believe that like we should increase immigration, but we should make them pay more for it. That seems to be Yglesias's position.
It does seem like that. That fucking is crazy. That's fucking crazy. So immigration, not looking too good here. Matt's whole book here is not looking too good on the substance. Not looking good on the substance or policies.
I hope we can turn it around.
So yeah, chapter 6, comeback cities.
Oh, good. He's going to turn it around.
Yeah,
don't call it a comeback.
And this chapter is basically talking about like he's talking about the like already existing big cities. I think generally, but it's also about how to like revitalize some of these like shrinking cities. In particular, he starts talking about at one point like he wants to build new universities and just like sort of throw them across the country into places that he thinks should have a higher population.
I think that's a good idea. I mean, universities are historically always a really great way to build a community within a given town. The difficulty, of course, is making sure that those universities are well appointed and well funded, which in the national climate is no mean feat.
No, yeah, absolutely. I agree. Like he's like right about the universities thing, because like where I went to school in particular, there is no reason for the population, like the population to be there. Like the place I went to college was a very small farm town with the university just right smack dab in the middle.
Right.
Like it does help that local economy. There's really the only reason that town's even on the map probably is because of the university that is there. So he is right about that.
Same thing too. I mean, with the universities that exist in upstate New York, like he talks a bit about the declining cities in upstate New York, but the fact that like you have in Buffalo, the University at Buffalo, or in Rochester, you have University of Rochester and Eastman School of Music. You know, these institutions are actually one of the things that is keeping these cities holding on in spite of that decline.
Absolutely. Because like the bare basics of this book that he's talking about is like, if you have more people go into areas, like the economies will start to flourish. And he's like on a base level correct about that. But he wants, instead of it to just be like how we sort of have it now, he wants it like the entire nation. But like I feel like in this chapter it's like he laments these like decaying old big cities that we don't currently take care of. The thing is we don't currently take care of any of these cities. We don't fund any of these university institutions. We don't really build too much stuff. We don't really have any national projects right now, but he wants this like very ambitious new project to take its place that will also apparently like take care of what we already have. It's like he's like jumping way far ahead. It feels like he's just like jumping way far ahead and not even like saying like we should tax people, like we should tax wealthy people. He doesn't even say that. He doesn't even throw that bone out there. He doesn't do that at all.
And generally speaking, his ideas for things that will improve these cities is to allow private industry to come in and establish something there. And the problem is, there actually are plenty of examples of this. And what ends up happening in those cities is not this like virtuous cycle of investment and reinvestment. What it usually looks like is these mega corporations utilizing the entire city's labor force for cheap and easily replaceable labor, and then eventually running through the entire labor supply. You know, it's very interesting that he pointed out Amazon HQ too, because I remember that's what much of this chapter is about. I remember when HQ2 came down to we're either going to do it in Arlington, I want to say, or in Queens, in Sunnyside, or maybe it was Woodside, but in Queens. And a lot of people in Queens were extremely opposed to it because they knew what would happen, which is not that Amazon will come in and be a good corporate citizen and really contribute. No, they will fucking take everything for themselves because that is what American capitalism does. And by that same token, he doesn't seem to understand that the process of sort of white flight and depopulation of American cities crisis was not just the result of the magical invisible hand of the market. It was the result of a series of calculated decisions that were made by capital. He says here, and I quote, "The original impulses for population decline were external. The invention of the automobile made it possible and in many cases desirable to live outside of the central city. Racism and fear of crime provided further impetus for white flight. Then, for Midwestern cities, deindustrialization proved a huge additional economic blow. At this point, however, population loss is not just a consequence of external problems, it's become its own self-sustaining source of difficulty." But the reason it's become a self-sustaining source of difficulty is that depopulation results in a shift of wealth, which the state refuses to recapture.
Absolutely. And I mean, I think that's such a really fucking good point. Like, there's so many different examples of these big corporations moving into different communities and just like completely uprooting and not really being that good corporate citizen. I mean, I'm blanking on the name of the town right now, but there's a very, very good documentary by More Perfect Union talking about one of the towns that Elon Musk's company SpaceX went into, this very poor, destitute Texas community. And everyone at first was like, oh, this is going to be great for us. Like, we're going to get all these new jobs. We're going to have more people. This is going to be a big boom for us. And it just has not manifested like that. And it's just become like people are turning on the company in this community, especially the poor people, because they're not seeing any result of this. They're not seeing any economic boom here.
I found this. This is Boca Chica Village,
Boca Chica, right? Yeah. And they're destroying the climate. They're destroying the beaches there.
Well, it fucking turns out that living next to a rocket launch pad isn't particularly great.
No,
who knew?
No, and it's driving the locals crazy. And they're SpaceX and Elon Musk are taking away these beaches that they have had to their disposal their entire time living in the city.
Well, you can also see examples of this with data centers, right? Companies like Microsoft are spinning up a lot of new data center capacity in these underinvested towns. And again, what's happening is not, oh, we get all of these people who get the benefit from it. No, what they get is not being able to fucking sleep because the data centers are too loud, because there's so many fans.
And this just goes all the way back to Matt Yglesias' fear of China and real political power. The reason China is thriving isn't because there's a private-public relationship between government and business and going and investing in different little communities one at a time. It's because they're actually going forth with real power. They're actually setting the course for the national project, not the other way around. Can you believe it, Josh? We have one more part to this book. Can you fucking believe this?
You know, I can believe it because I read the book.
So this book, I think it's my favorite title, is We Can Have Nice Things. I love it. That's a great. We can have nice things. You know what? We can have nice things. Maybe.
We sure can.
Maybe after all, we can. So this first chapter, he talks a lot about like zoning and like housing and basically it's just we have to build more housing, which I don't know. YIMBY and like NIMBYism has been a topic that people online that I've seen for years get really mad about. Like, I have just never really engaged with this discussion, but I think generally like it's probably good to build new housing like that. I think I'm generally on that side of like we should build new things.
But
generally.
I'm certainly not a YIMBY guy either, though, because the YIMBY guys fail to take into account that more housing is not a solution in and of itself.
No.
And that, generally speaking, the policies that advocate for building more housing, those are not policies that will build in areas where the most housing is actually needed, because there's a tendency among very wealthy people to capture areas and force low density there.
Yes.
And so like in New York City, for instance, the places that I would want to see a lot of really dense housing go up are places in like Midtown and Lower Manhattan. And because of the capture of these neighborhoods by really, really wealthy people, they're able to make that not happen. And so they're like, well, we've got to push this high-rise development out further into the outer boroughs where, you know, fine, we can have more housing there too, but ultimately that's not where it would make the most sense for it to be.
Yeah, I feel like he gives a lot of credit. He doesn't even really address the fact that like these large developing companies also could maybe be raising rents way above what tenants in the area are paying and like forcing gentrification or driving that sort of thing at all. So in Chicago, when you go closer to the Loop, there's a lot of big buildings. There's skyscrapers that are, a lot of wealthy people live there. Let's say that you just like moved one of these out to one of the like more west town areas of the city. That's still Chicago, not a suburb. There's no skyscrapers over here, right? Like, if you just plopped one of those big buildings into this neighborhood and you have like what a lot of these buildings have, where there's like a grocery store in the middle of the building at like floor 20, and then there's like a store underneath it, it will completely change the composition of the neighborhood.
Right.
And that's like actual bad gentrification if they put up like a skyscraper over on like one of the west neighborhoods. But just moving to a neighborhood if you have slightly above the like neighborhood's medium wage is not gentrification necessarily. Not inherently.
What it is it's participating in a process of gentrification that is larger than the individual people who are part of that cycle, I guess. When you talk about, generally speaking, these big let's build more housing things, it is targeting a specific type of resident. Amazon HQ2 being a prime example, where it would have just continued to bring more people into that section of Queens that would overpower the existing people who live there.
Force them all out,
I don't have a solution to this problem other than it is, as with everything, necessary that people be able to live the lifestyle that they want to live where they've been. I think that's really important. But I think that a purely market-based approach does not account for that.
Definitely not.
It does not allow for that. It cannot allow for that because keeping people in place, allowing people to stay in place if they so desire, is not the thing that's being incentivized.
Right. Absolutely. To round out this chapter, just because we could probably talk about the very complex subject of housing and zoning for a while, but I don't really want to do that necessarily. But he proposes, I think, maybe the most insane, I think it's the most insane policy idea that he has in this entire book. He calls it place-based visas. He puts out this idea. I don't know if he got it from someone else, but he wants to create this immigration visa tied to a city. So if you are an immigrant, you have to live in, like, let's say, like Tacoma or something like that for 5 years before you can leave. He wants people like landlocked into a city, and then they'll get like a green card after 5 years, which I like the green card idea at the end or whatever, but like landlocking you to a city, you cannot leave cities, is insane to me. I read this and I was like, what the fuck am I reading?
You can leave the city. You just can't get a job outside of the city.
Yeah.
And this to me doesn't seem workable at all.
No.
Mostly because there's no municipality that's going to want to be the one enforcing this.
Yeah, who's that going to be?
Like
ICE? I guess ICE or whatever, but like how?
I guess the idea is if you... Also, this is only the second most insane thing he says in this book. Number one is that Toledo is one of the very best places in the whole world to live. He says that.
Insane. Wrong. Just wrong.
Wrong. I guess the idea would be that, if I apply for one of these city-based visas, I can go live in Toledo. I can go work in Toledo. But if my job is rescinded, I can go search for another job in Toledo or go back. Those are my options.
Yeah. I don't know. This just feels literally impossible. It's an idea that is literally impossible to like in reality implement in any real way.
You can't get a job in Toledo, so you go to Cleveland, and then Cleveland is like, "Hey, do you have? I see you're on this city-based visa for Toledo. Sorry, you can't get a job here in Cleveland." That's not real. That's not real. That's not going to happen.
Yeah. I just couldn't believe my mind when I read that. Just genuinely one of the most insane policies I have ever, not even in this book, just in general, one of the most insane policy ideas ever.
Also, again, just think about it practically. I mean, it would just create a lot of incentives, I think, for the same kind of undocumented employment that we get more broadly, right?
Yeah.
If you are on the Toledo visa and you no longer can get a job in Toledo, that means that the most likely outcome is you go somewhere else in Ohio and you are employed there on an undocumented basis, which then means that you are completely at the will of your employer. You have no rights whatsoever. And also you're no longer on a path to green card citizenship due to the fact that you're not able to get a job in Toledo. Or maybe you will be at some point, but then you have to go back to Toledo. It doesn't this is stupid.
It's stupid. It's just like perfect technocratic centrist brain moment, frankly. So I think that's that's it for that chapter, really. This chapter, Getting Around, it's about...
This is the chapter that pissed me off the most.
Yeah, this is about public transit. Josh, do you want to tell me why this pissed you off? Tell me about it.
Because he doesn't understand what public transit is or what it's for. He doesn't get it.
No, he doesn't. He doesn't get it at all.
He doesn't know what the point of it is. And he says so many things that are just not true.
Yeah, no, he like, again, on the surface, it's like, okay, he's like right that public transit is good. I agree. Public transit is a good thing. And like, he doesn't even necessarily always say that. Like the example, I'll let you take this one. The example that you were texting me about earlier, it's just one of the more insane things he says in this book. If you want to go right to that. I don't know if you want to go right to that.
Do you want me to read this one?
Yeah. I'll let you. All right. I'll let you read this one. It's your favorite quote.
So he's talking about how when you have cities that are growing, you get more traffic jams on the roads and the highways, right? And he says, to most drivers annoyed by traffic jams, the intuitive answer is to build more or wider highways. The contemporary left tends to critique this notion by invoking the concept of induced demand. The way this works is that the congested state of a highway is a good reason not to drive on it. If you widen the highway and it gets more congested, that encourages more people to live on the farther out portions of the route, and soon enough the new lanes are filled. This is true as far as it goes, but it also applies to trains. If a new train reduces congestion on a major highway, it also encourages more people to live on the farther out stretches of the highway and bring the congestion back. That's not how any of this works, Matthew.
Insane. That's not, we have real cities that disproves
this. That's also not what induced demand is. What induced demand is that when the highways are made wider, you get more construction all the way along that highway. And so the choke points become the problem. Where any highway, you have to ultimately enter or exit via on-ramps or off-ramps. Those choke points get congested by the increasing density around the highway, and you end up with a bunch of traffic jams all the way around the route. That's what induced demand is. It's not at the end of the line, there are more people who come in. That's not what that is.
No, especially because perfect example for the Chicagoland area heads, people in the area, there was one of the most annoying construction projects on the highway going into the city for about 3 or 4 years, maybe even longer. That is exactly as Josh, you lined out. There was a horrible choke point throughout this, for 3 years straight, because they were doing construction on this highway to expand it. And it's just like that. Geez, he just doesn't understand. And
now that the highway's been widened, that choke point is going to get worse as that area continues to densify, which it will because of how induced demand works. It's a two-way street. You get more construction around the area with the amenity, but that increased demand cannot be serviced by the amenity that has been put into place because of the nature of the choke point. Whereas with rail, you can scale it almost infinitely because of the fact that it can handle so much more traffic and to the point of ends of the route that can't actually be serviced by rail itself. What you do is you put down a park and ride, and then you have people who go, they drive their cars, they park them there, and they get on the fucking train. Rather than taking the freeway all the way into the middle of town.
Again, completely like this. You see this all throughout the Chicago area, even up into Wisconsin. You'll see these park and rides everywhere.
He lives in fucking Northern Virginia, where every single fucking metro stop in a major suburb has a park and ride. They call it the kiss and ride for some reason. I don't know why, because I guess you're supposed to make out before you get on the train, which I approve of. But come on, man. You don't understand these problems at all. You didn't even try to understand these problems.
Yeah, no, I feel, fuck. No, that one, that's fucking crazy. I don't know, fuck, man. I don't know.
And I guess this is the thing that I come down to, right? Is trains, something that I know a little bit about. In general, traffic design, city planning, the intersection between road and rail. These are things that I know a thing or two about. I am not an expert, but I know something.
But you've played SimCity.
Of course. Yeah. But also my point is from that, I know enough to know that he doesn't know what the fuck he's talking about. And so I have to imagine that for all of the other things that are in this book where he proposes these solutions, subject matter experts in those areas are also probably like, what are you talking about?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna be real bold. I'm gonna say it. This book doesn't really seem to hold up to like in-depth analysis. Every review I saw of this book was from like a pundit or something, like, like Jake Tapper being like, there's a lot of great ideas in here, very inspiring. And it's like, well, I guess I guess it's very thoughtful. Yeah, very inspiring, sure. But I didn't really see too much beyond that for like reviews of this book.
The last thing I'll say about this chapter too, just because I think it's really important, is that one of the major functions of mass transit is to decrease emissions, right?
Yes.
And he says here, and I quote, "Given the existing technology, it genuinely makes sense for the majority of developed land to be given over to the kind of suburbs that Americans know and love, or in some cases love to hate. But on the small minority of land where vacant lots sell for 4 or 5 times the price of the median American house, it makes sense to build some pretty large buildings." But the thing is, if you just keep building these suburban tract houses, the consumption based on the land area use is going to become unsustainable when you are talking about tripling the population. That's not a serious argument.
And that's the even crazier part is like in the introduction in chapter 1, he talks about like the density of Germany and France and that we could like get fairly close, but he is seemingly pretty pro car here. If we were to do anywhere close to the project he wants to lay out, we need to discourage car use. We need to encourage primarily public transit as much as we can, as broadly as we can,
and specifically rail. Because that is what has allowed those countries in Europe to grow in the way that they have. They have motorways too, obviously, but they have mostly prioritized rail as their form of intercity connection.
His big fear, China. I'm sure you've seen those 2 maps of before they industrialized and now where they're at with their trains. They have built the most expansive train and railway system I think I have seen in my lifetime. Like they have done this very quickly and it has revolutionized the country because you can get anywhere across that big space, there's a lot of land in China. They can get across it within a day. And that changes so much. That changes everything.
Very importantly, too, not just people can get around, goods can get around. And goods can get around so much more efficiently than they can in the United States, which relies on really shitty railroads and trucks.
All big climate change producers. Again, before we move on from this chapter, I think just a little interesting note that notice how we're not really talking about like population boom in this episode necessarily. Like, the whole concept is 1 billion Americans. From like the first chapter, this is the first time at page 238, right near the end, is the first time he even mentions the idea of 1 billion Americans ever again up until like the epilogue, essentially, which I think is just funny. That's just a funny little thing to know.
Sorry, I have one more thing. Can I yell about one more thing in this chapter?
Please yell. Yes, please.
Okay. He says here, and I quote, "In practice, outside of a few markets, the tremendous slowdown in intercity rail isn't a big deal because trains wouldn't be competitive with planes anyway." That is not fucking true. If we had true high-speed rail in this country, it would absolutely be competitive with planes. It would be better than planes. If you could build intercity rail on the level of what you get in Japan between Washington, D.C. up to Boston alone, right? If the Acela could actually travel at 300 miles an hour the whole way, it would beat flying. Easily. Not just 100%. In terms of time, but in terms of efficiency and ease of use. You could get to,
you're convulsing. You're convulsing.
You could get from New York City to Chicago in like 3 hours if we had real high-speed rail.
You wouldn't have to do a whole day trip to do that.
No.
That would be I wish. That would be the best fucking world ever if I could just hop on a train and get to New York in 3 hours. Jesus Christ. This is the thing. This is the whole thing with this whole fucking book, with his whole mindset and why I think he has a failed ideology of the technocratic brain. It's just that he thinks it's like everything is happening because it's a market thing.
Yes.
Like, the planes won.
Yes.
Trains lost.
Yes.
So that means planes are better and more efficient.
Right.
People like them more. No, it's a policy problem.
That's right.
Everything is a policy and power problem. Where the trains failed because we didn't upkeep them. We didn't upgrade them.
Right. We chose to let the private rail network exist and dismantled pretty much all of our public rail infrastructure because we chose to side with General Motors instead.
Yeah. Yep. God. Yeah. No. I'm gonna have a heart attack at the end of this one. Holy shit. So there's one more chapter. Unless you have one last. I feel like that chapter 8 is an insane one. Also,
that's the one
if you're good,
that is hands down the one that made me angriest, and it's probably best for my blood pressure if we move on. Yes.
Yeah. Cool. So there's one more chapter here before we get to the end, and it's called The Land of Plenty. I don't really have too much to say about this one. It's sort of just like a recap ending where he's just like, we have a lot of resources. United States, we can do things. We should do good things. There wasn't necessarily any like super crazy quote that stood out to me. It's just sort of like his end of the book. It's just sort of like, we have a spirit of will to do these things if we can. He's trying to be like JFK.
He does talk a little bit about some solutions that have been offered in terms of raising taxes. A 0.2 percentage point increase on payroll tax, wealth taxes, estate taxes, but he does not endorse any solution. He just says, some people think we could raise taxes.
Oh, could we? I wonder how much.
I don't know if you knew that, but it turns out that we could.
I know, and it's crazy that even with his non-endorsement of some of these, they're already like very moderate solutions. They're not even like the more like the ones that you and I probably like. He's very moderate, and even the proposals he acknowledges exist.
The greatest potential source of revenue that he seems to give the most credence to is just increasing taxes on alcohol.
Yeah, he spent a lot of time on that. Actually, it's like he was like, let's do 50 cents or something. Did he say like 30 cents or 50 cents? I think it was
50-cent alcohol tax, which he says would raise upward of $100 billion over 10 years. That's not nearly enough money to fund any of this shit.
No, not anywhere close. That's going to be a drop in the bucket for this plan that he has on the agenda here. And then also just sort of really that's missing the whole like thing here too. Again, especially in 2025, the wealth gap between the richest Americans and like just everyone else continues to widen at a rate incomprehensible. Even just 5 years ago when he wrote this book, I wouldn't have even imagined that Elon Musk probably is going to be like a trillionaire.
He's going to be the world's first trillionaire if Tesla
soon.
Stock keeps going at this pace. Yeah,
it's like there is like unlimited. These rich people have like unlimited money, and he doesn't even like want to touch it.
There's no such thing as $1 trillion.
No,
this is something that I come back to a lot. It's like
it's nothing real. It's nothing physical.
Not for a person.
No, the most ambitious he can get is like, let's tax the poorest people in this country. That's probably going to go fine. Everyone will love us if we do that. No, that would destroy your coalition immediately. You would be the least popular political party in history if you did something like that. This is the brain level we're operating on right now in his book.
Absolutely. I mean, here's one quote. This is the closest he gets, by the way, to really talking about climate change. I am going to save my commentary on this until the end, or I am going to have a heart attack. There are parts of climate policy that are substantively easy but politically challenging, and a bigger population doesn't make them any more challenging. Then there are parts of climate policy that involve difficult technical problems, and a bigger population doesn't make them any more challenging either. Last, but by no means least, there is the considerable question of how to help the world adapt to the reality of rising temperatures, where the Billion Americans agenda mostly serves to help.
Mostly serves to help. No, thank you for bringing this part up, because this is the final section of this entire book if you don't include the epilogue. He ends this book on, there's probably going to be a lot of climate change, but like it'll be fine. Like, don't even worry about it. It will be better.
My agenda is going to help. And he does not support that statement in any way, shape, or form at all. The only thing that he says to support the claim is that our emissions have fallen overall over the course of the past couple years, which is technically true but misleading, because they have fallen by a very small amount, and they're not falling nearly as quickly as they need to under the fucking Kyoto, which we are a signatory to, or at least were. Not to mention that now under Trump 2, he is rolling back all of the protections that we did have, not to mention starting new oil exploration in coal exploration. Just opened up the Alaska National Wildlife Reserve to drill. God. I'm getting so angry that I can't say words anymore. Because it is the ultimate display of, I think, intellectual dishonesty, but also stupidity. To be like, if we triple the population, it's only going to make things better, but not supporting the claim at all. Fucking prove it, motherfucker. Prove it. Prove prove it. Show your work. I'm like a math teacher, right? Show your work. Like, let me see what you mean by this. What did you mean by this, Matthew?
It's all of that, and it just goes back to like how I feel like we frame this whole episode of just like the fact that he thinks that like if Trump lost in 2020, that was done. Like that era of history was done. We were only going to go forward.
That's right.
And I keep seeing these technocratic liberals keep making this mistake. Like when Obama won, it's like, oh, we're only in the good times. Only good times are ahead. Let's just think about like, oh, we're going to be able to just like, I don't know, have a billion people. But it's this tendency of this line of thought to just not even consider the fact that like, maybe like the right will pull us back. Maybe the right will successfully destroy so much of this country and like be able to use their political power to do these insane things. While the biggest ambitions that people like Matt Yglesias can think of are just taxing 50 cents on every drink.
Right.
That's like the most ambitious he can fucking get. When the right is like, okay, we're gonna open up these national parks to drill. We're gonna destroy wind turbines for some reason in like and like lean back into coal.
We're going to halt all federal funding to projects that are going to make it easier to get around, like the fucking tunnels between New York and New Jersey. Just like pulling all of the funding for those new rail tunnels. You know. It's a politics of spite. It's a politics of anger. It's a politics of punishment. And if your positive vision is not primarily occupied with making sure that things are durable enough to withstand the destruction of the right, then you're not thinking big enough, which is so ironic because the book is called 1 Billion Americans, which on its face seems to be a really big idea.
Yeah. And he just doesn't deliver. And funny that you mentioned that because the epilogue, so there's just like a couple of pages after this final chapter where he basically admits, and I'll read it, but he basically admits the whole premise of the book is just kind of dumb. So he says here, that being said, it's worth emphasizing that while 1 billion Americans may be impossible and absurd, there's actually nothing hard about it. So like, what is it? Like, it's impossible and absurd, but it's not hard?
It's not hard. It's relatively easy for me.
Oh God, Josh, I'm so sorry I made you read this fucking book. My God.
I'm not.
No. This was, I think, in the aftermath of Trump becoming president again, I actually think this was very important. Mm-hmm. And especially to myself, to remember that these are the people that we cannot let run the Democratic Party moving forward.
Yeah.
If we continue to let these people just like turn different dials and try to just like precisely get everything just right and perfect to make everything acceptable to like a Nazi in like Nebraska, that is not how we're operating. That is not how we should operate. This is a failed ideology, and like it shows the limits of the line go up mindset, the like idea that there will always be and should be infinite growth forever, right? Because that's inherently what this book really is that like we should continue to always grow. If we don't always grow, something is bad, something is wrong, we are failing, which is not necessarily true. Right. I don't think, personally.
Yeah, and the tacit assumption that they make is, well, the worst thing that can happen is that they'll take the dial and they'll turn it back again to the other thing, and then we'll get back and we'll fix the dial. No, that's not the worst thing they can do. The worst thing they can do is yank the machine out of the wall and throw it into the ocean. You know, they don't care about these little adjustments and getting things just right and dialing them in. They care about the capture and durable maintenance of power. And the thing that I've been thinking about since we talked about NatalCon was the way that for all of the bullshit that the fucking far Nazi right, those assholes, as stupid as they are and as annoying as they are and as myopic as they are in many regards, they at least understand one thing very, very clearly, which is that it is ultimately a fight for the direction of the country and the world. They know that if they can set the framing correctly, they can sucker well-meaning liberals into doing what their agenda is.
Yeah, they understand that politics is mostly about obtaining power and then wielding that power. Matt has no interest in like weaponizing power in any capacity. He doesn't really have any interest. He doesn't really outline power at all here. He's just like, well, these are some cool ideas that I thought about. If fucking we just no, you're so right. You're so right about like the fucking NatalCon freaks. They understand. The thing is they understand power way better than these technocratic liberals do.
In no amount of appealing to a shared national spirit is going to change that.
No, you can't trick these people. You cannot trick Sargon of Akkad into becoming not racist because immigration's good, actually.
Yes,
which like I agree with. Like, of course, immigration is good, but you can't just logic people out of those sorts of frames of mind because they don't fucking care. It's not about immigration per se. It's not really about natalism. It's not really about like birth rates. It's about like white power more than anything else. It's about obtaining power for white people to use that, and the way they do that is through this like natalism lens. And that's again the most frustrating part. Why he name dropped JD Vance. He doesn't seem to want to think deeper than what these people are saying on the surface. He doesn't actually care about analyzing the dog whistles that are right in front of him. He doesn't care. He doesn't think they're dog whistles.
Yeah. These people are bad. They're wrong. And the only way we are going to win is by making sure that they can never see power again.
I agree. And to end this episode, I think I just want to read one final quote that I think perfectly summarizes Matt Yglesias and his book. The alternative is to think bigger. The prospect of more rapid population growth raises lots of concerns, problems, and fears, and I've done my best to give plausible responses to them. If other people have better ideas or just different preferences about the details, then more power to them.
Oh my God.
How do you end your book like that? What do you mean?
That's so cool.
What do you mean? How is this like the third to last line in your book? Is like, I don't know. Anyone else have an idea?
In conclusion,
Anyone else have an idea? That's like a crazy way to end on this shit. Oh my God.
I will say my mind is feeling pretty sick and twisted right now. So I think I need to go. This did more psychic damage to me than NatalCon 2025. Genuinely.
And that's always before we wrap up here, and I think the reason for that is because like you and I obviously know that the NatalCon freaks are wrong and evil and bad.
Right.
But like the thing that's almost more offensive about people like Matt Yglesias is that they like generally we probably have way more in common with Matt Yglesias than we do with the freaks at NatalCon.
Right.
And that's what's so annoying about this is that like this is like these are our allies. These are the people that are supposedly going to help us take down fascism, or people that think like this, people that have framed their entire worldview like this. It's just frustrating. It's more frustrating than anything else. That was 1 Billion Americans by Matt Yglesias. I don't recommend you read this book unless you want to feel like how Josh and I sounded in this episode, which was, maybe not good. I think, we're going to go take care of ourselves.
But I do recommend,
we're going to log off here.
I do recommend that you go to patreon.com/illconceived if you want to be one of our eventual 1 billion babies and sign up for that shit. Listen to the mailbag episode that we just did about Elon Musk. And you'll be in for a treat at the beginning of next week when we talk about NatalCon once more.
Ooh, I can't wait. I can't wait for that one.
Until then, bye.
See ya.